There was a time in my life when I felt like if I wanted to get a new video game, I maybe would struggle to justify that, or maybe I just couldn't get it at all. For example, when I was a kid, I remember when some of my old favorite games came out. And back at that time, you'd go to the software store, or maybe it was Office Max or something like that, and there'd be these boxes of software. And I would look at the boxes, I'd want those games, I'd look forward to a new release. Games like Roller Coaster Tycoon or Zoo Tycoon or SimCity 4, those were the games that I was super excited about back then at that time. And I remember having this feeling of having to maybe make a pitch to my mother or something like that to get these games that I wanted to play. And there was that sense that if I didn't make the pitch right then and get the game, well, maybe I would lose the opportunity of a lifetime. Maybe I'd never have a chance to get that game. There is this fear of missing out, that fear of not being able to have the opportunity later if I missed the opportunity right then in that moment. And then later in life, I experienced financial challenges where there were times when I felt like I should go do something right now, buy it right now, get it right now, because if I don't do that, I might not be able to get it later. I might not be able to buy that thing next month because I was living month to month and struggling to pay bills and just didn't feel like I could ever get ahead to a place where I'd be able to just casually afford some random game that came out and not worry about it. I gotta get out of here because I'm trying to fight these trolls and I'm about to die. All right, well, anyway, back to what I was talking about. You know, I was kind of going through this sense of desperation, right? Like I've had that in my mind, whether it was being a kid and wanting to get a game and having to kind of ask for permission to get it, or maybe being a adult and having financial problems and feeling like I wasn't able to do things that I wanted to do. So do it today, so you know, so you can have that thing you want, right? In any case, then as life has gone on, I've worried less. And I've gotten past a lot of those things. Like I don't really worry, at least right now, I don't worry. It's about something like buying a video game. It's just not really a huge concern. There isn't really any sense of, if I don't buy it now, I'm not going to have the opportunity to buy it later. I'm not going to be able to afford it. That's not really the reality of my life right now, but I find it's interesting. I still have a little bit of that feeling. I still have that sense of, you know, there's a new game that's just released. It's in the store and I take a look at it and think, oh my goodness, that's cool. It's out. I need to get it now. And even if I don't want to play it right this minute, I still think, well, I want to buy it right now at least and add it to my collection, get it in my Steam library, because I'm going to want to come back to that. I want to play that game sometime, and I should get it now while I can. As a side note, I'll say that it does not help that Steam always has these amazing sales going on. And there is that sense of FOMO, which is exacerbated simply by the fact that Steam is always giving you these great opportunities. But that's probably another topic entirely. For the purposes of this video, what I'm talking about is that sense of desperation that comes from a place of being in need in the past. The sense of not having enough in the past. It's like the dog that's always been hungry and always been malnourished and always had to fight, and then has food, and the food is given to the dog, and the dog suddenly is like, oh my goodness, I have to eat as quick as I possibly can because the food will be taken away from me. Like, my friend is like that. This guy, I know him. He's a good friend of mine, and we'll go out to eat because we work together, right? And then I noticed, like, this guy eats fast. Like, I gotta eat fast to keep up with this dude, and it's obnoxious. And I confronted him about it once. I was like, dude, you're like, I don't know what it's like to be like your wife if you ever take her out on a date or something. I hope you don't scarf your food like that there, because like, it's a horse race to eat as quick as possible, because like, I'm just sitting down to start savoring my meal, and I look over there and he's finished. And you know, it all boils down to when he was a kid, like, he did have kind of some struggles, and so he got it kind of ingrained in him that when you have food, you got to eat. Like, you got to get down to business. You got to eat, but you don't hang around because it might get taken away. You might lose it, right? And so that's a real thing. When we have need in our life, when we have deficiencies, when we have a fear of loss, or we get used to that culture of not having enough, then sometimes even when we do have enough, we still keep that sort of a reflex. And that can be a thing that we need to become aware of and then maybe work through a little bit, because you don't want to always be trying to hoard things that you don't really need to hoard just because you have a sort of a fear response to the thought of losing something, or the anxiousness of maybe not having something. I also think about how, of all those games that I buy, it's interesting how many of them I don't actually play. Maybe I play them a little bit. I check them out. I think they're cool. I enjoy them for 2 or 3 hours. And then later on, I look at my Steam library and I realize that there's 4 or 5 or 6 games that I play all the time. And I'm approaching 1,000 hours in those games. And then there's those other ones, the 100 or 130 games that I've never actually played for more than a dozen hours. And I think that is a good reason to segue into the topic of how time is actually more rare than money. To put this in perspective, I could conceivably become more wealthy. That's a very attainable possibility, but I'll never grow younger. So time is a limited commodity, while money is kind of a fictional commodity, and certainly it's possible to get more of it. And I think the more life passes for a lot of us, we kind of make that shift. We go from feeling like money is really hard to come by, but we have an infinite amount of time. Like, just ask a small child about their perception of mortality. You know, like, when you're 6 years old, you're not thinking about how you're going to retire, right? You're not thinking about the end of your life when you're a teenager. But then as you move through life, you start to think more about things like legacy. You start to think more about things like, am I doing things today which are going to be meaningful to me as I grow older? Am I doing things that are going to be meaningful to share with other people so that my life amounts to something? We have more of a sense of the importance of time as we move through our lives. And at the same time, generally speaking, we become more financially stable. We learn some of those money lessons. We learn how to maybe not be wealthy, but we learn how to be okay money-wise. At the same time as we increasingly become aware that time is not something we can ever have more of. And so maybe one reason why I don't finish a lot of games that I have in my library is because I have a sense that I need to sit down, play the game, finish the game, and then move on to another one. And that's hard because increasingly games are big. They're engrossing, long journeys that require study and learning. Face it, a lot of games are complicated. The way you navigate in Red Dead Redemption is different than the way you navigate in Elder Scrolls Online. Even basic things like learning how the game works requires some level of playing the tutorial, refreshing your memory of how the game mechanics work, and that is a time commitment. Often a pretty significant time commitment if you're going to reach the end game, even something resembling end game. So there's that tendency to think, well, I'll get around to playing that game eventually when I have time. When I finish some other things, when I get done with other games I play a lot more, when I get tired of my favorite game, maybe I'll segue over to that. And that time never really comes. And so you wind up with this game you FOMO'd into buying just because, that you never actually played at all. And that leads me to the point of time and how much reward measured in time you really need to get for the money that you invest. So let's say, I'll just use this as an example because I just bought a game, kind of like I was just talking about, right? I always say, you know, it's the last time, I'm not going to go buy any more of these games. And then I go into the Steam store because I just got to take a peek, right? And then there, lo and behold, is a game that I've been kind of watching that's been on the wish list. And in this particular case, it's a game called Rattenreich. It's a real-time strategy war game. And the premise of this is that it's basically like World War II, only it's fought by rats and roaches. And I like little animals and stuff, and I like World War II, and I've been a fan of real-time strategy games in the past, and when I have played them, I've always gravitated toward that World War II era. And I thought, this looks like a really cool indie game that's coming out. And I've had it on my wish list for a long time, kind of forgot about it, and then looked, and lo and behold, it's actually just released in early access. So I bought it. I paid $15. And let's unpack this. First of all, $15 to support game developers who are producing something which is innovative and unique, to me, is a good investment, even if I never played the game at all, because I think game development is an amazing thing. It's something that I will probably never do. And yet I feel like I get a certain value out of being able to say that I'm part of that in some small way to support an industry that I think is amazing. Maybe I don't play that game very much. Maybe I don't enjoy it very much, but maybe there is somebody else who does. Maybe there's some 14-year-old who's going to eventually play the full release of that game, and they're going to have a blast, just like I did when I was playing Empire Earth back in 2002 on a 56K modem. And maybe my $15 buying a game that I ultimately don't play very much helps support a dev team that's going to make that experience possible. So I think that's something worth talking about. But The other thing that I think is important here is that I will play the game. I'll play it. I'll install it. I'll give it a little bit of a college try. I'll see if I enjoy it. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I'm going to play that game for 900 hours. There's a real possibility I might play that game for a couple hours and then decide that despite the fact I thought it looked cool when I read about it in early development, it doesn't really live up to my expectations. That's a possibility. I don't know. I haven't even tried playing it yet. But let's just say that all I did was install it and get a couple hours of fun out of it on a Saturday afternoon. I paid $15. I paid less for that game than I would pay to get a fast food meal at McDonald's. Imagine if you went to the fast food restaurant and you paid $15 and then you somehow expected that that hamburger and fries was going to continue to deliver quality and fun and entertainment into your life for the next 6 months. That would be ridiculous because it's a $15 hamburger, right? Like, that's all it is. And I think sometimes we get so fixated on this idea of commitment that we also lose track of the importance of diversity. It's kind of like a stock market portfolio. On one hand, there's people that say, okay, I want to be a day trader. You know, like, I'm going to buy a stock, I'm going to wait, I'm going to flip it, I'm going to sell it an hour later, and I'm going to just be hopping all over the stock market, buying, selling, flipping, minute by minute action. And then there's other people, and they'll just say, oh, well, you should just put your money into a 401k, and you should put your money into solid stocks, just add, continue to accumulate, and don't ever think about it. Don't ever sell. Don't ever do anything with it. Just invest in the stock market. And then after 40 years, then you'll have a good return. Okay. The truth of the matter is that you could be a day trader and you could be successful. And you could also be a person who invests in the legacy stock market in a very conventional, boring way, and you could be very successful. But if we wanted to say what is the most wise thing to do, there's probably somewhere a middle ground between the two of those, where maybe you buy and you sell on a 200-day moving average. Maybe you buy and sell based on technical fundamentals. But somewhere along the line, you buy with the intention to buy quality. You buy with the intention to potentially go long on that investment. You don't buy it necessarily because you think you're going to turn around and flip it tomorrow. But at the same time, nothing goes up forever. And so there's a point where maybe you swing trade. Maybe you say, okay, I'm going to ride it up for a while, but if it goes way up, at some point I'm going to take my profits and then I'm going to reconsider what my plan is, and potentially I will be open to doing other things. You want to have a mixture between commitment and diversity. And in gaming, I think there's games that I feel are kind of like that virtual second home. They're those games that you keep coming back to because there's something about them that just makes you want to be part of them. And maybe those are the games where you go in your Steam library and you've got 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 hours in a game. And then you got all those other little games which you didn't put hundreds or thousands of hours into. You just put a little bit of time into and you thought they were cute or fun or interesting. And then you moved on. And some of those are just like snacks. You got your $15 out of them, and that's fine. And then there's some of them that are more like, I don't know, maybe this is a bad comparison, but more like the marriage, right? They're the ones that you will continue to play on and off. Even if you quit, you're coming back. And years down the road, even if you stopped playing them entirely, you're going to be telling the tales of how amazing that franchise was. There's room and there's time for both. But in conclusion, what I will tell you is that we really should focus on spending our time doing things that we enjoy, doing things that we feel are valuable, doing things that we feel are meaningful. Maybe it's spending a consistent daily amount of time in an MMO that you've played for a decade. Maybe it's spending a couple hours broadening your experience, your perspective, having a new adventure and a game that you're going to spend for just 2 or 3 hours and then set it down and be done with it and move on to something else. But whatever you do, you should spend your time in a way that you feel is rewarding. And I think we all are guilty of wasting time doing things that we don't really feel are valuable because we feel somehow like we don't have enough time to do something important, so therefore we don't do anything at all. We aren't sure that we want to spend 1,000 hours in one particular game, so we don't give it any time at all. And when I look back at the way I spend my time, I don't really regret spending time on a game that I didn't finish, as much as I regret things like maybe the empty scrolling on social media. All those things which make you feel like you lost time and you don't even really know how you spend it. So my challenge is this: diversify your portfolio of things you do. Make time for things that are short term, while also leaving space for things that are more long term. Have a mix of both. Some things that you continue to invest time into for many hours, some things that you commit just small amounts of time to. Don't be desperate, because the truth is, you don't have to overfill your plate just because you encounter food. It's okay to leave something unfinished, to leave something on the table, something that you didn't load up on. Because when you get to the point where you're ready for it, you'll probably be able to get it then too. Just like that Steam sale that pops up and says you can have 80% off some particular game. Well, there is a point where you probably should say it's okay, because this is not going to be the only time when I can get a good deal. Always focus on doing things which add a sense of value to your life, things which inspire you, things which feel meaningful. Today, we had a employee at work hit 35 years. And actually, I digress. It wasn't exactly today. It was like this approximate time. This is happening. She's hitting 35 years of service to one company, and she's retiring. In poor health, she's going to be honored for devoting pretty much her entire working career to one business. And you know what stood out to me about this? What stood out to me is the fact that nobody really cares. Of course, there's going to be people who say, congratulations. There's going to be people who say, thank you. There's going to be people who try to make that milestone feel special to her. But the reality is, nobody is really all that moved by it one way or another. And that's a good illustration of this point I'm making about commitment. Commitment is important when you're doing something meaningful. But commitment just for the sake of it, commitment just so that you can say that you were grinding longer than anybody else, that's empty. To contrast this, I was thinking about the other day when I went on a little road trip to drive from Montana to Tacoma, Washington to meet Ken and Roberta Williams, who founded the Sierra Online company, and to meet people who were fans of adventure games from the old days. And it felt so meaningful to me to be able to talk to and meet these legacy pioneers who were so instrumental in creating advances in computing and advances in the video game industry. And I care a lot about them because they helped me to believe in myself as a child by bringing to life these amazing stories and adventures that opened up the world to me and added perspective to my life unlike anything else I'd ever experienced. You see, they did something with their life that made me feel different about myself. And I think about people like Elvis Presley. You could find other performers who had just as much skill as Elvis Presley, and yet no matter who you are, even if you're someone who doesn't necessarily care about his music, everyone knows who Elvis is. And the reason why Elvis was so special, probably more special than a lot of other musicians who were perhaps even more talented than he was, it's not because of the skill, it's not because of the genre. It's because in his day, Elvis had a way with people. Even if he was a broken man, he had a way of making people feel special about themselves. And it wasn't about him. It wasn't about his years of service or legacy. It was about the way he made people feel about themselves. I'm reminded of that quote. I've said it on here before, but I couldn't say it enough that people will ultimately forget what you did, but they will remember how you made them feel. You can spend a lot of time doing things, and that can be pretty inconsequential. But if you do things that make you feel better, and you do things that make other people feel better, the things you measure in inspiration will have consequence and meaning as you move through the time of your life. That's true whether we're talking about gaming experiences, whether we're talking about careers or relationships, whether you're talking about a person who spends 3 decades playing the Elder Scrolls, or a person who played, well, the game of career grind in some company. It's not how much time you spend. It's how much quality you find and create in the experiences that you have. So maybe, to wrap this all up with a bow, we've talked about how much things cost in terms of time a little bit, and we've talked about how much things cost when measured in money. But really, neither of those mediums fully encapsulate what actually creates value. What truly creates value in life is love. It could be the love of another person. It could be the love of a job. It could be the love of an idea. It could be the love of a game. But whether it's somebody who's spent more hours than we care to admit playing World of Warcraft, or someone who spent more hours than any rational person would pursuing some other hobby or a career or another achievement entirely. The things that matter in life, the things that make a difference, not just to you, but to others, the things that make you honored and remembered, are the things you've done from a place of love. So stop and ask yourself, do you love that thing? Do you love that person? Do you love that place? And spend your life doing things that you love. Maybe it's stepping outside and taking a walk and looking up at the starry night. Maybe it's spending time with somebody who just makes you feel good about life. For everybody, it's something different. But life is too expensive to spend it on things that we don't love. So, life has loveliness to sell. Buy it and never count the cost. Till next time. As always, thanks for watching.